Hello everyone. In this last video, it's going to be a very short video. I'm going to give you an example of me going through a question which you will most definitely see on your homework and on an exam, a midterm or final exam. Okay. So in this example, I give you a random variable z, which is the standard normal random variable. Okay, so I say z is normally distributed with a mean of 0, standard deviation 1, and I ask you to find different probabilities. Okay, and so this is more chance for me to show you or to give more examples of how StatCrunch will deal with this. Okay, so again, I'll exit out. Probability that z is less than negative 1.2. So again, I'll go back to this normal calculator, which I showed in the last video. Okay, and enter in a mean of 0, standard deviation of 1. Okay, and I want to find the probability that I see a value of less than negative 1.2. Okay, less than negative 1.2. And it turns out that that probability is 0.115. Okay, I'll round to 3 decimal places there, 0.115. So that's the answer for part 1. For part 2, I ask a between question. Okay, what I call a between question. What about the probability between negative 0.5 and 1? So when I go back to the normal calculator here, I want to select between. Okay, still means 0, standard deviation 1, between negative 0.5 and 1. Sorry for the flipping back and forth. And it turns out that that probability is 0.5328. Okay, so you always report a probability as a decimal. Okay, sometimes it's a percent, but that's much less common. I want a decimal. You can usually round it to 4 decimal places as a rule. So there's 0.5328. Now, what about the probability that z is greater than 0.22? Okay, to do that, I want to go back to the standard option. Okay, and I want to say greater than, not 0.22, 2.2, my bad. 2.2. Okay, there. The picture matches up. It's shading an area greater than 2.2. And the probability turns out to be 0.0139. Okay, 1.39% or 0.0139. All right, and then the last one, which is the tricky one that we need to keep in mind here. This is one of the trickier ones that you'll see here, and you'll see it in the homework, and you'll likely see it on the exam, is that I want you to quote-unquote work backwards. I want you to find the point at which only 10% of the distribution is larger than that point. Okay, so that is a very different kind of question than the other 3. Okay, but we're going to use the same information. So I want to find the point. Okay, so if we have our normal distribution here, I want to find the point on the x-axis such that the area to the right of that point is 10%. Okay, and so I can actually do this with StatCrunch. Here I keep the mean and the standard deviation the same, but I get rid of that number and I plug in, or I substitute in, the percent that I want in this box. And so I want 10% or 0.1. And when I click compute, it's going to actually give me that number such that the area to the right of that point is 0.1. Okay, and so it turns out that the answer is 1.28. 1.28. Okay, that gives me a point such that only 10% of the distribution is larger than that point. Okay, so that is what I usually call working backwards. Instead of giving the probability statement here and the number and then asking for the probability, I gave you the probability here and asked you to get the number back. Okay, again, when finding these kinds of questions, this last one, this question here, find the point at which only 10% of the distribution is larger than that point. It's imperative that when you do this calculation, you look at the picture and you say, does that make sense? Does that seem plausible? If it doesn't, then you need to rethink what you're doing. All right? So here's the your turn. So there's the your turn. It asks you the same exact set of questions, only the normal distribution has changed. So you should be able to go through and find these answers without too much of a problem. Okay, and so that's where we're going to end the video. And this also ends lesson 4.